Good afternoon. I'm Jake Ward. Thank you for joining us and welcome to a webinar discussing some of Kentucky's business successes and continuing innovation. We are going to welcome in a number of Kentucky small business success stories as representatives from the Commonwealth today to discuss the ongoing work that's being done to promote small business activity in the state, as well as the work that many small businesses did over the past 2 years as they fought to keep their doors open and to survive during the pandemic. These are difficult and complex times, but thousands of Kentucky small businesses have shown the way how to invest in themselves, in supporting their customers, and keeping their businesses afloat during that time. We're really looking forward to that discussion here today. It's my pleasure to host this discussion on behalf of the Connected Commerce Council, which is a nonpartisan, party-affiliated trade association for small businesses. We are doing a lot of work with research and programming such as this to connect small businesses to both their policymakers and the tools and resources that they need, particularly in this time of uncertainty. With that said, I'd like to kick it over to one of Kentucky's leaders in small business advocacy and innovation, State Senate Majority Floor Leader, Senator Thayer, who is kind enough to join us today, even though there is a lot going on at the Capitol. Senator, if you hop on here. There you are. Wonderful. Thank you for joining us today, sir. I appreciate it.
Well, you're welcome, Jake. I want to thank the Connected Commerce Council and my friends at Run Switch for asking me to join the webinar today. I find it slightly ironic that a member of Generation X is being asked to discuss technology, but I have witnessed the changes that have taken place in our economy, as well as our policies here in Frankfurt over the last 19 years that I've been in the state Senate. You know, even right now, we're allowing our members to join committee meetings via Zoom, at least temporarily. It's something we started, like everything, right? Zoom took off in these virtual meetings, other providers, et cetera, took off during COVID, and we allowed our members to start attending committee hearings last year and continued into this year. I don't know if we'll continue it next year, but there's no doubt about it that these virtual meetings and conferences like this are here to stay. I'm a guy who prefers the in-person meeting. I'd rather be in a room speaking with all of you live today, but there can be no doubt that technology that supports platforms like this continues to change our economy. It's still evolving today. And is going to probably have an effect on worker satisfaction and productivity as we go forward. So here we are 18 months in to the pandemic, still trying to figure out where we're headed with the Delta variant, but our economy continues to open up and we're recovering and growing. Hopefully we can get more people back to work. One of my fears coming out of the pandemic and the federal government paying people a lot of money to stay home on their couches with their Netflix remote is that we've got people that don't want to go back to work. And that's a problem, as a lot of you probably know. In all sectors, we're having some significant workforce issues. So that's something that employers and policymakers like my colleagues and me are going to have to deal with moving forward. But we're in a recovery. And I'm cautiously optimistic. I'm a little concerned about the fake money that was poured in at really excessive levels from the federal government. Not only the long-term debt issues there, but also, like I mentioned earlier, the fact that we basically paid people to stay home, and now we've got a sector of society that doesn't want to get back to work. But we're definitely recovering, and I think some of that is due to policies put in place several years ago in the early stages of the Matt Bevin administration, when the Republican supermajorities in the House and the Senate passed a number of bills improving economic conditions in Kentucky. And I'm not I'm not the kind of guy who thinks it's the role of government to drive the economy. One of my favorite sayings is, we need to remove artificial barriers to free enterprise. It's not the job of government to create jobs, but it is the job of government to create a friendly environment for jobs. As a matter of fact, I can look out my window here at the Capitol, and there's a massive stage that's been erected over there because we're having a pretty big announcement today that's going to be the result of a bill we passed a couple of weeks ago that I co-sponsored, that allowed the governor and the economic development cabinet to front load some economic development incentives that put us in the game that's going to land a pretty big company, two companies to bring thousands of new jobs to Kentucky. But back in the early days of the Bevin administration, as I mentioned, we made Kentucky a right to work state. We repealed the prevailing wage, which reduced the cost of construction for publicly funded construction projects. We passed a significant workers' compensation reform bill, working hand in hand with the Kentucky Chamber of Commerce. And we started what I hope is the first step down the path of reforming our tax code, moving away from taxes on payroll and production and moving to taxes on consumption. And just as a refresher, we cut the personal and corporate income tax rates from 6 to 5%, expanded the sales tax to services. And, looking at what's working in other states like Tennessee and Florida and Texas, which have no income tax, pretty much everything driven by consumption taxes. I'd like to get there someday. Not sure we can, but I'm also very intrigued by the Indiana model, which has personal income taxes down in the 3-ish% with a broad array of consumption taxes on sales and services. So that's where I'd like to see us head someday. But this is not all about what government has done or not done. This recovery is also being fueled by resilient entrepreneurs and small business owners across Kentucky, many of whom had to endure what I thought were two wrong-headed and poorly thought out lockdowns last year. Good news is there aren't going to be any more of those. But we lost a lot of jobs and businesses during the pandemic, and so I want to commend those businesses who were able to be flexible and creative and to stay in business during this time. And also those who are starting new businesses or attempting to come back from it. But also the online tools and the platform that's provided a digital safety net for business to be able to endure during the pandemic and then moving out of the pandemic. In a lot of ways, the pandemic probably accelerated a lot of these trends that had started before COVID-19 hit us. You look at the Amazon online store model. That was rolling down the tracks at a pretty rapid rate of speed, and now that's accelerated. So I spent a lot of time focusing on our signature industries like horse racing and breeding and bourbon, and they garner well-deserved attention and national headlines. But Kentucky's technology sector is growing like never before. Technology exports increased by 30% last year, topping $2.65 billion. And those are the kind of numbers that get the attention of policymakers like my colleagues and me. And certainly we've got large-scale manufacturing facilities like the one in my hometown of Georgetown, Toyota. And there's going to be a big announcement today about Ford. It's no secret, it leaked out last night. Going to build a very high-tech battery plant in Hardin County, along with SK Strategies. A really big deal. But what's also important, and I'm a big believer in our manufacturing economy, but I'm also a believer in digital trailblazers, like many you're going to hear from later today, to innovate and create new jobs and new ways of delivering products and services to the marketplace. These kind of jobs and technology fuels our economic engine and will continue to do so in the future. So our resilient small businesses are relying upon the digital safety net now more than ever to keep connected with the world, to supply customers in their communities and around the world. And indeed, we passed a significant allocation of monies from the federal government, from the ARPA funds, to fund broadband in Kentucky. And in my county, Scott County, fastest growing county in Kentucky, our friends at Charter Spectrum just announced a major build out that will be a model for the rest of the Commonwealth to get broadband Wi-Fi out to rural areas of the state. That's going to continue to fuel this digital safety net. Last year, Connected Commerce Council reported that 78% of Kentucky small businesses used their digital tools amid the pandemic, compared to only 72% nationally. So we're 6 points higher than a national trend, and it's good for Kentucky to be leading a national trend. I think that's probably due to our wide swath of rural areas. And there may be other factors as well. And this year, Connected Commerce Council reported that compared to digitally uncertain businesses, digitally advanced businesses have fared 20 times better in acquiring new customers and 50% better in overall revenue. Tragically, this report found that nationwide, more than 1.5 million digitally uncertain businesses likely closed during the pandemic. So, they got hit with the double whammy of these lockdowns and people staying in, and they didn't have the ability to connect digitally like those who are digitally advanced. So moving forward with this broadband expansion that I mentioned earlier, that will continue. Innovation and connectivity will continue to power our economy and fuel the success of both new, existing, and recovering small businesses in our urban, suburban, and rural areas alike. We have all the above. We have a huge swath of rural Kentucky. Population in those areas, however, we're seeing as we're preparing for redistricting after getting the census numbers, population in those areas is dropping as people are moving to the suburbs and to urban areas. So I feel like Kentucky's open for business. And, you just saw a situation a couple of weeks ago where there was a bipartisan effort. Governor Beshear, who I'm not a big fan of, and if you read about the legislature, you would know that, but he asked us to help him. We put politics aside, when it comes to, in Washington, they say that politics is supposed to end at the water's edge. That's not the case anymore when it comes to our foreign policy. Little editorial comment there, but in Frankfurt, when it comes to creating jobs, politics needs to end at the door to a new or expanded business. And so we worked with the governor to front load some already in law economic development incentives that have been around for a long time, because there were other states just writing blank checks. A lot of our surrounding states writing blank checks to try to get these jobs that are going to be announced this afternoon. So we did that. Senator Julie Adams was the sponsor of the bill, a good friend from Louisville, and I was the proud primary co-sponsor, and we got it through, passed it with alacrity, and now it's come to fruition. So, for those of you who like bipartisanship, today's a pretty good day. And for those of you who like manufacturing jobs that are being fueled by new technologies, today's a pretty good day. So I think it's a great day to be a Kentuckian and be proud of what government has done by removing artificial barriers to free enterprise to create new jobs and opportunities for Kentuckians.
Senator, thank you. And thank you for your time this afternoon. I know you've got an incredibly busy schedule. And thank you for citing the digitally driven report that 3C produced last year. That was, just to give a little more color on that, we, just like everybody else at the beginning of the pandemic, were concerned about what the lockdowns would do to the economy, particularly for small businesses that often operate on much more of a razor's edge, smaller profit margins, et cetera. And what we found, which shouldn't surprise anybody on this call, is that the more digitally empowered a business was, the more tools they used, the more integrated those tools were, whether it be online retail or communication or even back office functions, the more empowered they were, the more likely they were to survive the first wave of the pandemic. And then increasingly, as states like Kentucky invested in an environment that would foster growth and allow for the digital safety net to send these companies back on the right track, they survived where other businesses did not. This is the digital transformation we've been talking about for 15 years, taking place in 15 months. It is not ideal circumstances, but it is the reality that those businesses that have made it through the past 18 months are better prepared for the next crisis and are the next, are sort of the pointy end of the economic spear as we get going on the economy.
Well, we're paying attention here, and you know, we're like I said, we're going to be we're big supporters of our signature industries, but we we have to also look to growing sectors as the economy inevitably changes. I mean, that's just ask the buggy whip maker. Back when Henry Ford invented the Model T, people have to be flexible and creative. Coming out of the pandemic, again, I think a lot of trends were accelerated because of the pandemic, but new trends were created, and those who are able to take advantage of those are the ones who are going to thrive over the next decade.
Not to put too fine a point on it, Senator, but I suspect there is not a single small bourbon distillery in Kentucky that doesn't use Facebook advertising, Instagram advertising, distribution, logistics software, and some form of a back-end office solution like QuickBooks. That is how American small businesses start and run until they're no longer small businesses. And that is the economic dream in a nutshell.
No doubt. I use QuickBooks. I send in my consulting business. I do my invoices on my iPhone.
Of course.
Yeah. My business partner, and another side hustle I have, started a bourbon brand this year, and our marketing efforts were about 100% on Instagram, which is kind of the place to be if you're in the bourbon space. And I wasn't on Instagram before COVID. I did it to follow my kids because they teased me that Twitter and Facebook are old people's social media.
What they say.
I resemble that remark, and now I'm on Instagram more than they are. So and they tell me I've got to get on some new stuff that I'm not going to try. I mean, there's a limit to my tech abilities and willingness to open up another social media platform, guys.
Well, as I take us into the next panel, and thank you again for your time, I would remind everybody watching us now and on the recording later, as well as our panelists for the day, that every small business has a story just like that, right? That they are trying new tools, they're looking for new audiences, they're trying to find the way to some stable foundation upon which they can build, and that some of our discussion today is going to be about creating an environment at a state level, but also how to succeed when national rhetoric has decided that technology, America's leading industry, is bad from a competition standpoint or from a who's got too much power standpoint. And we can have that conversation, but ultimately it's small businesses like your fledgling bourbon brand and like my privacy education platform that have to use these tools. And if you make them less accessible, they become more expensive, they become less effective. It's small businesses that pay the price.
Well, I'll leave you with one last thought. Government does best when it does the least. I'm an old line Reagan conservative, and government sometimes just needs to get out of the way instead of thinking about regulating these big successful tech companies. Believe me, if they start regulating the big successful tech companies, then they'll start thinking about regulating the medium and the small size. So don't let the camel's nose get under the tent when it comes. And I get polled all the time about, do you favor regulating Facebook and Microsoft and there's a big, I'm a Republican, and people think that a lot of these social media platforms are anti-Republican, and that's a topic for another webinar. But politics aside, I don't think the government needs to get involved and start regulating them.
That's what markets are for.
Water will take its natural course. If conservatives don't like a certain platform, there's an incentive out there for others to be created, and that's actually happening right now.
Thank you again for your time. We're gonna promote the bourbon brand in the comments after this post on YouTube. Thank you, sir. Have a good day.
All right, bye-bye.
Okay, let's jump right into our first panel. I think the senator set it up nicely, talking about how states and communities can create an environment that promotes small business success, that leads to innovation, that provides the stability and a culture of growth that is critical to the success of small businesses in any market, and particularly in the Commonwealth. So let me welcome in our panelists, and we'll jump right into this. I'm going to throw it to each of you. Give your names, titles, and actually, let me give you this prompter. Tell me a little bit about what the last 18 months has been for you from a business standpoint. How has your life changed? How has your work changed? And sort of one big takeaway. Shelby, I'll start with you since you're on the left of my screen. Why don't you go ahead?
Sure. Hello, everyone. Happy to be here today. My name is Shelby Summerville. I'm the VP of Government Affairs and Communications at Greater Louisville, Inc., which is the Metro Chamber of Commerce here in Louisville, Kentucky. Last 18 months, very interesting. So I have actually just been with GLI since April, but before that, I was with the Kentucky Society of CPAs doing their government affairs work. So in the realm of government affairs and advocacy, we went all virtual right in the middle of state session, which was very interesting, having to go from, trying to chase legislators down the hallway or have meetings with them in person to all virtual, trying to, get your point across via email and make sure that needs are met, and, all of the federal guidance that was coming out. At that point, when I was doing it for CPAs, the Paycheck Protection Program and this federal funding, the CARES Act, trying to get that information. And I know GLI as well, because I worked with them during that time, but get that out to your members when it's changing almost every hour sometimes was a real struggle. But it was amazing to see the resilience of the businesses in Kentucky and in Louisville, and those that were deemed essential that never stopped working, and then those that weren't, that had to go home and figure it all out, they did, and they gave it their all. So it was also very inspiring to see that happen with a lot of the businesses here in Louisville and in Kentucky as a whole.
Well, Shelby, you hit on several of the buzzwords there that we're going to talk about in a minute. Inspiring, resilience, and trying to figure things out. That's really the spirit of small businesses. Josh, why don't you go next, please, sir?
Sure. So Josh Crawford, I'm the executive director of Pegasus Institute. We're a public policy think tank located in Louisville. But in addition to being a public policy think tank and being regularly engaged in research on policy issues, we're also a small business, right? I've got a half dozen or so folks who come into the office on a regular basis, and we shut down when we were deemed non-essential. As important as I think our work is, it's not essential for those purposes. That was exacerbated by the fact that our offices are in downtown Louisville. And if you know anything about downtown Louisville, last summer and fall, there was a couple instances of some violent riots. And so we were remote for a good part of 2020, and we're benefited, right, by the fact that I'm 31 and I'm our second oldest person. Right. So most of my folks grew up on the internet, grew up on computers. And so we were able to sort of seamlessly transition to that remote period because it's how we've lived most of our lives. And in that way, we were particularly benefited. But having to sort of do that policy work that is often collaborative, often requires folks bouncing ideas off each other, this person editing this that then goes to that person. That was certainly a transition to the remote space, but we ended up being more productive than we ever had before. We did more podcasts, more blogs, more long form research in 2020 than we ever had to date.
Remove the commute and you see how efficient you become, right?
Exactly.
It's like getting an extra hour every day. Colby, how about you?
Hey, good afternoon. I'm Colby Hall. I'm the executive director at Shaping Our Appalachian Region, which we go by SOAR. So Jake, 18 months ago, I was at my previous job. I've been with SOAR coming up on a year. So I was in Atlanta, Georgia, and where I worked previously. And when we finally made the call to go fully remote, I guess it was built up to be this big thing. And then I guess when we woke up that next morning and over the next couple of weeks, we realized how little things changed, which I think was to the maybe the surprise of many folks was just there was no drop off. And I led a sales team. Right. And, most folks think of sales as something that's you got to be together, this culture, and you've got to feed off the energy, which I agree to a point. But, really our team was more productive and the numbers played that out in a fully remote setting. So when I joined SOAR, we were in still a fully remote world. We've since transitioned. Our structure is a little unique in the fact that we have some folks out in the field. We cover 54 counties in our work, trying to diversify the economy of Eastern Kentucky, the 54 counties that are considered Appalachian by the Appalachian Regional Commission. So I've got folks in the field, and then I've got folks that report to our home office here in Pikeville. And I think for the most part, unless it becomes an issue, I kind of take the philosophy that if the work gets done, I don't care where you do it, right? And that's tend to how I lead. So thanks for having me, and I'm excited to be here today.
Oh, we're delighted to have all of you. Thank you for taking the time today, guys. So the Connected Commerce Council, you probably heard me tell this Senator, that we spent some time at the outset of the pandemic trying to get our bearings like everybody else. How bad was this going to be for small businesses? And what we found in 3 installments of research where we surveyed thousands of small businesses throughout the country and really tried to drill down on what folks were facing, what we found is this idea of a digital safety net, that there were ways for businesses to transition to remote working, certainly, but there are also ways for restaurants to do dine out service. There were ways to pivot your business if you're a retailer, Shopify, Amazon, eBay, rather than strictly storefront. But there are also efficiencies that were possible in a more digitally empowered world, whether it be taking better use of QuickBooks and whatever CRM system you were using to manage inventory more efficiently. That small businesses, because we operate with such a small margin, have to be creative, right? We have to do better math than the people we compete against in order to be successful in any market, in any industry. I'm wondering if you guys have any insights, any thoughts. It's not a mandatory question, but about insights that you identified during this process. I know Josh mentioned they were more productive. Why do you think that was, Josh? Why do you think that you were able to sort of reclaim either more creativity or more time?
Yeah, I think part of it is what you mentioned, right? Like when there's no commute, you wake up, you can start working, you can go to sleep and stop working whenever you want. So I think there's some of that. I think some of it was that we were forced to be innovative, right? Like Senator Thayer mentioned the horse and buggy and the Model T example, right? When you're the horse and buggy industry and the Model T comes on the scene, you have 2 options. You can go under by continuing to make the horse and buggy, or you can find a new product by which you can compete now with the Model T. And I think that's sort of what we had to do, right? We had to innovate the way that we communicated with one another. It's when you're doing research, right? Like when you're doing, especially the long form research, it's very easy to like put on your cone of silence and not talk to anybody for a period of time. But when we're physically separated, it forces us to find ways to communicate more. We were communicating more regularly. I mean, we were sending emails, every day with one another, and we weren't necessarily communicating that productively in the office. We were certainly communicating in the office, but it was more, small talk and water cooler talk than it was that productive communication. But when forced into that physical separation, that sort of productive communication had to take place. And I think that that's carried over now that we're back in the office and doing things that way.
I think that's right. Colby, how about you? Efficiencies that you guys in either of those jobs that you found and reclaimed?
Well, I want to answer for our organization, but I'll answer, I think, in a way that I think is good for Eastern Kentucky and some of the small businesses that we work with. And Senator Thayer mentioned, Instagram being his primary, I guess, platform or marketing medium that he uses. But in a region like Eastern Kentucky where population outflows have been kind of the norm, and population I would consider to be kind of the number one collective enemy of all the counties that we serve is trying to reverse population loss. The internet and the tools that come with it is a game changer, is an equalizer for small business owners, because they've got the same access to potential consumers and marketplaces as somebody in a more metropolitan area. So they're not just limited to the amount of folks that walk by their front door in a downtown. Now, don't get me wrong, I love downtown shops, but if it would be scary, I'm here in Pikeville, Kentucky today, and if every small business, there's a lot of retailers here that whether it's apparel or trinkets or something of that regard, if their only way to make a living or to make sales were just with the people that were in downtown Pikeville, that would be, I think, a challenge. But if they have a strong online presence, it changes the game as far as the customers that they can get in front of, leveraging a lot of these cutting edge tools that some of the best companies in the world are using. So I think, looking at it through the lens of a small business, if they have the right product or service that has appeal beyond just the region that they're in, this is a world where they can compete and can win.
Not to betray my bias, Colby, but I grew up in a very small town in very northern Maine, and the ability for shops to stay open relied entirely on whether or not it was a dry summer so that tourists would come through, because in the winter, nobody was going anywhere. It was freezing cold and nobody was trying to buy shoes on Main Street. It was off the table. This digital economy we live in is pure capitalism, right? If you've got a better product at a lower price or a better service at a lower price, you're going to win. It doesn't matter where you are. And you can run your business with that in mind. Shelby, what efficiencies did you see realized over the past 18 months?
Yeah, I mean, just kind of piggybacking off what Colby and Josh said, a lot of small businesses are using digital tools and online marketplaces to adapt and to keep their businesses open over the last 18 months. And I think a lot of small businesses that were empowered by digital tools prior to the pandemic definitely sidestepped a lot of the hardships that were faced by other companies. If there was a small business that might have had a little bit of an online presence before the pandemic, you can bet that they, jumped and tried to expand their online presence, like Colby said, so that they could reach more people, sell their product online. And a lot of these companies like Amazon, Pinterest, Etsy, and Facebook Marketplace provided small businesses with cost-effective sales platforms that allowed them to reach a much broader customer base than they could have before. So it was really critical over the last 18 months for them to have those digital tools and those resources and the accessible marketing platforms that traditionally they would not be able to attain to reach the same potential customer base. It would have been a lot more expensive or, harder to do that. So they're able to reach people across the U.S. and even globally with the right type of targeting.
So let me ask you to put your sort of galaxy brain hats on for a second. As the senator just mentioned, and is often the case, when policymakers, state and federal, start having a conversation about access to technology platforms, they invariably go to big tech, and they talk about antitrust and also conservative bias or content moderation, depending on what side of the aisle on. I am fond of saying that the issue around antitrust is largely fueled by confusion around CDA 230, and the Democrats are still furious that Donald Trump was ever president, and Republicans are furious that he's not still president. And as a result, we have a lot of different forms of activity, and we don't need to talk about any of those, except to say it is our belief that the ecosystem and the vertically integrated economy of technology companies powering businesses of all types, leading to employment, leading to innovation, leading to growth, was working before the pandemic and is working even better now. Why would anybody want to disrupt that, particularly when we need it now more than ever? I wonder if, like I said, putting on your respective representative hats, what you and what your organizations think about the current state of things, and what you would tell policymakers, if you had them for a few minutes, about the nature of this. I'm fond of saying this isn't Standard Oil, this isn't U.S. Steel, this is something else, right? This is a different animal entirely. Colby, let me start with you and get your thoughts on what you would say to state senators, to the majority leader, both state and federal for that matter. Remembering I'm talking in Kentucky. The lessons you hope policymakers take from the past 18 months and think about the future when they are legislating this environment.
Yeah, I might leave Shelby and Josh to give the definitive answer on that, Jake. That may be above my pay grade. I'll just simply say that a lot of time these tools, at least looking at it through the lens of what I see as the prototypical small business owner or entrepreneur in Eastern Kentucky, is that they use a lot of the names that we hear about largely sometimes in negative connotations, right? And that doesn't mean that there may not be some merit on that. I'm not an expert on big tech regulation or anything like that. I just know, as Shelby mentioned, from a cost-effective standpoint, that if those technologies have any rise in price, that's going to probably disproportionately affect small business owners, that if they have lower profit margins, any critical tool they use that goes up $10, $15, $20 a month, that's going to come directly from their bottom line. So I'll just kind of leave it at that those small business owners are using those tools in some way, shape, or form because largely they're typically the best in the business for whatever that end use may be.
And you claim not to be an expert. Thank you. Shelby, why don't I throw it over to you? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, really simple. I think, really the main point would be the vertically integrated digital economy allows for lower bottom line costs and higher convenience for the end consumers. So if this has changed, I think you're going to see costs and convenience for many goods and services that consumers now take for granted dramatically shift for the worse. And, as end costs increase and convenience decreases, they're not really gonna like that. So I guess that would be my main point to them.
I agree. Josh, want to wrap us up?
Sure. So in 1958, which was a far less technologically advanced time than we live in now, Leonard Read, who was the then president of the Foundation for Economic Education, wrote a little pamphlet called I, Pencil. And it was a story about a number two pencil from the perspective of a number two pencil. And he made the argument that no one person in the world could manufacture a number two pencil. At the time, the wood for this pencil would have come from the Pacific Northwest. The graphite in the middle of this pencil would have been mined in South America. The rubber that makes the eraser would have come from Indonesia. And that's just the materials for the pencil. To acquire that wood, you'd have to chainsaw it down. And so you'd have to have steel for those blades. You'd have to be able to manufacture the steel for those blades. If at any point you attack any one of those industries, it becomes far more difficult to get a very simple pencil. That is so much more true in the advanced economy of the 21st century, and is so much more true for these small businesses as it relates to these large technology platforms. Here in Kentucky, we have rural communities where their entire website for a restaurant is a Facebook page. And so their ability to get information out about changes to outdoor seating, to things like that during the pandemic, to changes to menus post-pandemic comes exclusively through Facebook, where payment systems are exclusively Square or PayPal, where website hosting is hosted by Amazon. And if individual small businesses, be they donut shops or furniture stores or whatever, had to figure out on their own how to host those things, it would be remarkably more difficult. It would be remarkably more expensive. And you'd see a lot of these businesses go out of business because in truth, there are so many different people who have to touch something in order for it to work. To get to this number two pencil, thousands of people across the world have to cooperate to get to this pencil. If those people met in person, they may hate each other. They come from different places, different cultures, and yet they all have to work in unison to get to this pencil. The same is true for your mom and pop grocery store, your mom and pop restaurant, your mom and pop car lot. All of these things are so reliant on these other entities. And so if you want to punish Facebook, you want to punish some of these large companies, you're going to end up hurting a lot of these smaller businesses.
Josh, I hope you won't mind if I just steal that entire story and use it at most of my events for the rest of the year. We're almost out of time, but let me go around the horn real quick. Predictions for the next 18 months of Kentucky. What do you see for Kentucky small businesses, for the Commonwealth generally? What is your prediction? Josh, let's go right back to you.
Sure. I think Senator Thayer hit on a lot of the things that I also believe, that Kentucky is working towards making a business environment that is more friendly to small, medium, and large businesses. That the more friendly that environment gets, the further that economic development will come, not just from outside dollars coming in, which is wonderful, but from these homegrown businesses that are responsible for a large percentage of employment in the state.
Wonderful. Shelby, sorry.
I agree. I think Senator Thayer said it well, cautiously optimistic on the next couple 18 months. He touched on tax reform. I think that's great, both statewide and local tax reform that are being discussed for next session, making Kentucky more competitive, making it, more attractive so that we can attract and retain a diverse workforce and get our workforce rank up on the list. But I think looking good and just going to keep on fighting the good fight, I guess.
Great. Colby?
I just continue to think that if there is a silver lining to this pandemic, it's that a region like Eastern Kentucky, but I think it goes for all of Kentucky as well. It puts us back into the driver's seat as you see people move from cities to suburbs to exurbs, I guess is the word that economists use, which is great for our state. So I think we've got a great opportunity to see some momentum. And to say Senator Thayer's point, what a exclamation point that announcement was yesterday in the Ford plant in Hardin County, which should give us some great momentum heading into that next 18 months, Jake.
Absolutely. Congratulations again, guys. And thank you for your time today. I really appreciate it. I'm going to welcome in our next panel. We've talked a little bit how to create an environment at state level, threats to it at a federal level. Let's hear directly from some of Kentucky's more successful small businesses, folks that have both survived the pandemic, but also continue to thrive in the aftermath of these changes that have taken advantage of digital tools, and in some cases provide those digital tools. So let me welcome in Jenna Ahern, Peyton May, and Josh Ravenscraft. There we go. Hello.
Hi.
Hi, Jenna. How are you?
Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. Why don't we go around the horn? I'll start with you, Jenna. Just a little bit about your company, and then we'll do some questions right after that.
Absolutely. Guardian Owl Digital. We are a search engine marketing firm helping small to medium-sized businesses with their digital transformation. And we do this through specializing in search engine optimization, bringing innovative search engine tools like AI to the table and helping businesses along that journey. So we're headquartered in Butchertown, downtown Louisville, and we have feet on the ground in Pennsylvania, St. Louis, Florida, and all over the country. So that's us.
Welcome. Thank you for the time. Peyton.
Hey, Peyton with BitSource. I function as the COO here, and I'm a partner with Rusty and Lynn. I think BitSource is most known for transitioning coal industry professionals into software development about 7 years ago when we were faced with economic collapse. But since then, we've been building a tech company around those, base 10 people that we started with. And we do software development as a service, and then we also build products. We've worked cross-sector in healthcare, in the municipal space, K-12 education, post-secondary, engineering, legal, and it goes on. So we've tried to find our sort of place in the market and sort of looked everywhere in that process, I guess.
That's wonderful. Thank you. And thank you for joining us. Joshua, you're last. Go ahead.
Yeah. So my name is Josh Ravenscraft. I'm with New Frontier. We're here in Moorhead, Kentucky. I'm the CEO here at New Frontier. So, and as a small business owner, you own that title, but a couple hours later, you could be packing orders. So I don't let the jacket fool you. We're boots on the ground as well. Yeah. So I mean, really, we're reimagining fashion and textiles here from Eastern Kentucky, from an off-the-grid place. You mentioned you're from a small town. We're from a really small town here in Moorhead. So connectivity is really, really important to us. We got to have it to stay alive, from a small town. So I guess we'll dive a little bit deeper into those questions here in a minute.
Josh, we're fond of saying that we only hire one type of person because there's only two types of people in the world: those who pick up trash and those who won't because it's not their job. And we only hire the former.
Yes.
Right. It doesn't matter what your title is. Trash on the ground, you got to pick it up.
So true.
Exactly. You got to be a Swiss Army knife. Yeah.
That's right. And actually, that leads me into my first question. I would imagine that your lives looked a lot different over the past 18 months than they did the 18 months before, where not only are you trying to keep your teams in line and trying to manage folks remotely, trying to think about how you're going to pay the bills in a couple of months, but also thinking about, where is my audience going, right? Where are my customers now? What does their life look like? And so all of us had to take on, the role of CEO or ops person, marketing person, thinking about the management side of things. How has your life changed in the last 18 months? And I'll go in reverse order this time. I'll start with you, Josh.
Yeah. So the past 18 months, I mean, everybody in some shape or form, the COVID is something just got put right in our face. And really, a lot of people could find bad things to say about the COVID and what it did in business or to their business. But, at New Frontier, we try to embrace change and embrace, kind of the future in that uncertainty. As far as being flexible, that's part of life. Business, to stay alive in business is about change, and I think that's a core element in our business. And that's what kind of allowed us to stay on the right path. So it sounds crazy to say that when the COVID hit, we weren't too surprised as far as changes in the business, because we started in a garage. So, I mean, we started at the bottom with like $200. So when the COVID hit, we were like, we've seen, personally in business, we've seen hard times. So we just found ways to adapt, found ways to take care of our customers differently. And I'm sure Jen and Peyton can probably say the same.
Being a small business is both an act of lunacy and courage, right? Like deciding that you could do this better than anybody else is nuts. But the knowing that you can't possibly work for somebody else is what qualifies you for the job. Everything else comes after that. Peyton, how's your life changed?
It's kind of a mixture. Some things changed and some things didn't. I think being in software development, we were kind of positioned, already being digital, to just position for virtual in terms of working remote. We're pretty spaced out here. We're a small team. So half the team kept, kind of coming in, and we just adapted. We had, several clients and projects that we were servicing that were, larger kind of deals that were in the middle of, that we just kept on, right on going with, that, we didn't have any disruption. But then we definitely saw, the market fluctuate and demand start to change. But we did see, e-commerce pick up, of course, as, that's been talked about in panel one. So, yeah, I think it's been a mixed bag, but we've sort of hung in there.
That's great. And Jenna?
Yeah, and certainly I was laughing at Joshua's comment because, we've all started for a one-person show at some point. So, of course, we had seen at Guardian Owl business not look great and started from just complete bootstrapping. So we were down immediately overnight once the COVID really happened and places started shutting down. But then it was a surge of businesses realizing they needed to transition to e-commerce, or realizing they needed, development on their website to hone in on delivery services. And so we then grew from a payroll standpoint and really struggled with our internal utilizing digital tools, our project management systems, being able to uncover silver linings and efficiencies in our business that we hadn't really been stretched to do in the past. And COVID and the surge of new business made that a reality that we needed to tackle right away. So it was good to hone in on some processes to be able to scale. But to both Peyton and Joshua's point, we were already positioned from, being on a search engine marketing company digitally anyway. It just really pushed the envelope on what we could get better at and improve at from an online standpoint in managing our business.
Yeah, it's part of your DNA already.
Yeah.
You may have heard me mention to the senator that we have done a lot of research at 3C over the past little bit, and one of the indicators of success that frankly fills me with optimism, even beyond sort of the natural inclination that small businesses are going to they're going to lead the way of our national recovery, is that most small businesses who say, I've adopted a new skill or a new tool, or I've expanded into a new market, also say they're not going back, right? That this is the way that they're going to build their business and succeed in the future. Whether it's a bookstore that was on Main Street for 40 years and has taken that inventory, shots on their iPhone and posted on Shopify, and that's how they're selling into even if their community hasn't expanded, they're still delivering service. They might have real estate, a storefront somewhere, but it's not going to be as large because it isn't the totality of their business. And it also enables them to use digital marketing. I wonder, now that I've asked you to look backwards, if you could look forward, what does the next 18 months look like? How does your business expand or change or pivot now that you know what you do? And let me, before I throw it over to you, Peyton, to start, let me first say that one of the things about the digital safety net and the resilience of small businesses is that it doesn't take a global pandemic to create havoc in your community. It takes a snowstorm or a hurricane or an economic downturn or any sort of wildfire in California, right? Any of these things can shut down your business for 2 or 3 weeks. What are you going to do? How are you going to transition? How are you going to make sure that people keep getting paid and that your customers get what they need? And so that resilience being baked into the technology piece is super important from our perspective. Peyton, let me throw it over to you.
Yeah, so we've always been balanced between software as a service in terms of our custom development and then our own product. So we have a decent base that we service now that we continue to build around. And then we have a product for municipals that we're scaling, and then a product for the education space, probably grades like 6 to 12 that we're working on scaling. And then we're focused on sort of the manufacturing sector right now, and then healthcare in terms of some automation solutions and data science and machine learning. So, we're trying to follow where the opportunity is and get positioned in terms of our technical skills and know-how to be able to, serve those future demands. And then, I think resiliency and adaptation, to your point there, is kind of baked into being in Central Appalachia. Like, you're already in a tough environment, everything's harder, you're on a hill, you're not on a flat land. So, I think we're used to it, and we'll keep up the fight, hopefully.
It's great. Jenna, what do you think? What's the future hold?
I completely agree with the machine learning. I think conversational computing and predictive analysis, companies using that to create efficiencies, not just in their marketing strategy, but their business as a whole. And you mentioned earlier on the webinar that COVID sped up this digital transformation process like 15 years. And I think that that's happened. And so you're seeing marketing and machine learning really at a crossroads, and that's continuing to snowball. So I think even for small businesses, you're going to see AI being a part of your conversation in the next 18 months.
I completely agree. Josh?
Yeah, the next 18 months for us, and I feel like for other small businesses, double down online, double down on the online platforms that are available, double down on tech. That's where the future is going. It's already going there. It's been going there. The COVID was just, kind of a reminder, it was a reminder to people like, hey, if you're not online, if you're not paying attention to tech, now's a really good time, or you might not be around in the next 5 years as far as business goes, or even 10. So yeah, to keep the answer simple, double down online, double down on tech, and put your trust there.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Let me give you an opportunity to sort of answer this question, and then we'll wrap up because we are running out a little bit of time. Jenna, I'm going to start with you on this. You've got the ear of policymakers. You have the support of your company and your cohort, your community. What is it the thing that you would ask for? Sort of what's on your mind? What's holding you back? How can we help? What is the thing that you would ask for in support to make that vision come true?
I think continuing to do this and bring in business owners and small to medium-sized businesses into the conversation. So I think the policymakers and legislation, they're obviously taking action, but I think you need the voices from, the Fords of the world to all the way down to the Guardian Owls, and continuing to bring this space and ecosystem to Louisville and Kentucky is tremendous. So I think that this is a great starting point.
Wonderful. And Josh?
Jenna, that was really good. I could just say what you said, but that would be cheating. So no, yeah, and it starts there, and it also starts, I think, with education early on. Maybe this is above my pay grade, but maybe this starts in like public schools. Maybe there's some sort of tech and online classes, because I know personally, out here at like middle school, high school, you don't necessarily, or I know I didn't anyways, have classes on that, but it would be good to start that conversation a little earlier, I think, in education, or make it more available rather than when you get on campus at a college, start talking about it. So if we could, maybe that's one answer, education. But yeah, starting convos, make it normal and not make it, weird or difficult. Like we should have these combos. It's the future, it's happening, and we should find ways to work together. So yeah, think we're on the right path. You just got to keep the momentum going.
That's great. It's great. I'm glad you didn't just say, that's what she said. Peyton.
Yeah.
I'm going to touch on a few things that we're involved in that I think kind of answer the question indirectly. So BitSource's challenge has always been accessing external markets, right? Like when we're in the digital space, the part of being able to find customers outside of our region is what, makes us economically sustainable. And we've tried to leverage the attention that BitSource has gotten with MIT and the national publicity we've got, for our community. So we've got a National Science Foundation grant for 10 schools here in Floyd County and Pike County that teaches teachers computational thinking and computer science curriculum development. And it's been a 3-year program, like $1 million grant. So, I think that's a big win for our region here. And then another thing that Rusty Justice, our co-founder, was a part of is called the MIT REAP, the Regional Entrepreneurial Acceleration Program. And it looks at 5 key stakeholders in a model for transforming, the economic landscape. And of course, the government is one of those. And so they participated in like a 2-year program, but the organization that's been founded out of that's called Accelerate Kentucky. And I am a fan of I think the work and the mission that's going to be done there to kind of align our state government and our local governments, with our entrepreneurs, with our education space, with our venture capital, and really, drive change for the economy.
Wonderful. Thank you, guys. I am right at time, and as promised, I will deliver us right at the buzzer. I appreciate your time today from our second panel, our previous panel, as well as from the senator. I know you guys are incredibly busy, and we at the Connected Commerce Council, as well as everybody who joined us today, thank you for your time and your insights, and good luck in making those future come true. Let us know how we can help. We'll be here, both at a state and federal level, and we look forward to working with all of you.
Perfect.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good day.
Yeah.